Number 30. Hoover stew. The scuffed enamel saucepan from the back burner came forward for this one, with the dented tin lid rattling once the tomatoes started to bubble. Soup kitchens served it in the early 1930s, and the recipe was so plain that there was no salt, no pepper, and no spice in the original. A package of hot dogs got sliced into coins. A box of macaroni went in dry. A can of stewed tomatoes and a can of corn finished it. The whole supper cost less than a dime per plate during the worst years of the Depression. Grandmothers who lived through that decade kept making it on bad paycheck weeks, long after the soup lines closed. It was the kind of pot you could leave on the burner while you went to lie down for 10 minutes, and it would still be a supper when you came back. Number 29. American chop suey. New England kitchens borrowed the name from a Chinese restaurant idea and turned it into the cheapest weeknight supper a tired woman could put on a table. The first printed recipe ran in the Alton Evening Telegraph in Illinois in August of 1910, with ground beef, a can of tomatoes, an onion, and macaroni. By the 1950s, Milltown wives in Massachusetts and Rhode Island were cooking it on Friday paydays when the meat budget was already spent. 1 pound of Hamburg browned in her seasoned pan. A chopped onion went in next, then a can of tomato sauce and a box of elbows that cooked right in the same pot. 40 minutes from coat hook to table. The leftovers went into a lunch pail wrapped in waxed paper, and nobody complained because nobody had anywhere else to be. Number 28. Slumgullion. The word showed up in Mark Twain's 1872 travelogue Roughing It, where he used it to mean a watery stew served to gold miners. By the time the Depression hit, the name had attached itself to a thick beef and noodle pot that hobos shared along the railroad lines through the Dakotas and Montana. Grandmothers who fed men off the boxcars in the 1930s kept making it long after the trains stopped bringing strangers. Brown a pound of ground beef in a deep skillet. Throw in a chopped onion, a green pepper if you had one, a can of tomato sauce, a can of stewed tomatoes, and a cup of dry elbow macaroni. Cover the pan. Walk away for 20 minutes. Some families called it American goulash. Some called it just supper. The name moved with the people who carried it, and the recipe stayed almost the same from Pennsylvania to the Pacific. It was the supper a woman could put together with one hand on the spoon and the other on a child's shoulder. Number 27. Cream-chipped beef on toast. The Army called it SOS, and the polite version of what those letters stood for was same old stuff. The recipe was published in the official Army Manual TM10-412 in August of 1944, near the end of the war, after the cooks at base mess halls had been making it for a decade. When the boys came home in 1945 and 1946, they wanted it on Sunday mornings, and their wives learned to make it in the skillet on the back burner. A jar of dried beef from the grocery, a spoonful of flour, a slick of butter melted slow, and a careful pour of milk into the pan. It thickened in 5 minutes. Spoon it over a piece of toast, and that was the cheapest hot supper a young couple could put on the table in a post-war kitchen. Veterans called it the taste of coming back. Number 26. Salmon patties. A can of pink salmon sat on the shelf at Piggly Wiggly for under 30 cents through most of the 1950s, and Southern grandmothers bought 2 at a time. Open the can, lift out the bones if you cared to, mash the rest right into a bowl with 1 egg and a sleeve of crushed saltines. Patty them up with your hands. Heat a slick of bacon grease in her seasoned pan until it shimmered. Drop the patties in, 4 at a time, and they crisped golden on each side in about 3 minutes. Grandmothers in Alabama and Tennessee served them with a wedge of lemon and whatever was left in the pickle jar. The whole supper came together in the time it took the cornbread to bake. Some women added a spoonful of cornmeal to the mix for crunch. Some used flour. The pan never went into the dishpan because nothing went in it but salmon. Number 25. Hamburger stroganoff. The real Russian dish needed sirloin tips and good wine, and almost nobody in a small American town in 1956 had either one. So the grocery aisle version showed up in the Betty Crocker recipe cards and on the back of the cream of mushroom soup can, and grandmothers in Iowa, Kansas, and Pennsylvania adopted it inside of one summer. Brown a pound of ground beef in her iron pan. Stir in a chopped onion until it turned glassy. Pour a can of cream of mushroom soup right into the meat. Add a spoonful of sour cream from the cardboard tub. Boil the egg noodles in the same pan 10 minutes later, with the lid on so the starch thickened the sauce. The supper was on a plate in 28 minutes for under $1.50 across a family of 5. Buried in this dish is the way it crossed the Atlantic, got rewritten in test kitchens in Minneapolis, and ended up on a Formica table in a coal patch town where the woman cooking it had never heard the word stroganoff pronounced correctly. The recipe she pulled from a drawer was clipped from the back of a soup can in 1958, and the soup can grandmothers of the late 50s through the early 70s kept that clipping in a tin recipe box on top of the icebox. The dish stayed cheap because the soup was cheap. The dish stayed quick because she only washed one pan. The dish stayed on the table because the children ate it without asking what was in it, and a tired woman at the end of a long shift will always pick a supper her children eat without asking. Number 24. Tuna Noodle Skillet. The pantry version came together in one pan on top of the stove. No oven, no second dish, no extra rinse. Boil a handful of egg noodles right in a wide pan with 2 cups of milk and a knob of butter. When the noodles softened, in went a drained can of chicken of the sea, a can of peas from the cellar shelf, and a fistful of crushed potato chips on top for what 1950s women called the topping. Lid on for 2 minutes, then straight to the table. Grandmothers in church basements served the casserole version on Wednesdays, but the weeknight skillet version was what tired wives in post-war suburbs actually cooked when the husband came home from the factory at 6 and the children had baths at 7. Number 23. Beanie Weenies. Van Camps came out with their pork and bean can during the Civil War years, and by the 1930s, the cheapest hot supper in a tenement kitchen was a can of those beans opened with a hand-cranked opener and dumped into a pan with sliced franks. The whole thing warmed through in about 7 minutes on a low flame. Grandmothers in Pittsburgh and Cleveland fed it to night shift husbands on Sunday evenings before the mill whistle blew at 10. Children called it Beanie Weenies and asked for it on Fridays after the bathwater cooled. The molasses in the beans was the only sweetness most families saw in a week, and the franks gave the pot its salt. Spoon a ladleful over a slice of buttered Wonder Bread, and the bread soaked up the sauce, and the plate came back clean before the radio program had even started. Number 22. Wieners and Sauerkraut. Pennsylvania Dutch grandmothers and Ohio German immigrant wives kept a brown crock of sauerkraut in the cellar year-round, weighted down with a clean riverstone. On a Tuesday night, when the meat budget had run thin, they pulled a fistful of the kraut out by hand, dumped it into a deep skillet on the back burner, and laid 8 wieners on top in a neat row. Lid on. 20 minutes on the lowest flame. The kraut turned mellow against the franks, and the franks split their skins. Add a peeled russet potato, cut into chunks once the pot got going, and now you had a one-pan supper for a family of 6. A short pour of cheap beer halfway through was the grandmother trick that softened the sourness and made the kitchen smell like a Pittsburgh church hall picnic. Number 21. Skillet Cornbread Supper. Southern grandmothers in Mississippi and Arkansas had a one-pan trick for the back end of a payday week. Brown half a pound of sausage or whatever ground meat was on hand in a deep iron pan. Pour a quick cornmeal batter right over the meat in the same pan. Slide the whole thing into a hot oven for 25 minutes. The batter rose and crusted golden on top while the meat juices soaked the bottom. One pan in, one pan out. A wedge of that, a glass of sweet milk, and a slice of tomato in the summer. The recipe traveled out of Appalachian kitchens during the Dust Bowl years and showed up in church cookbooks from Tennessee to Texas by the late 1940s. Tired farm wives in Oklahoma made it on threshing nights when 15 men needed feeding, and there was no daylight left to fuss. Number 20. Pork chop and rice bake. This was the supper that cooked itself in 40 minutes while she sat down for the first time since breakfast. Lay 4 thin-cut pork chops in a deep skillet. Pour a cup of dry, long-grain rice around them. Pour 2 cups of water over the top. Add a sliced onion, a sprinkle of salt, a few peppercorns. Lid on. Lowest flame on the back burner. Walk away. Grandmothers in Iowa and Indiana set the timer, sat down in the kitchen chair with the bent leg, and rested their feet for half an hour before they had to set the table. The rice drank up the pork juices and went tender. The chops finished bone loose. One pan to wash, no oven heat, no second pot, a whole supper for a family of 5 at the cost of 4 chops and a cup of rice. Number 19. Cabbage and noodles. Polish and Slovak grandmothers in the steel towns of western Pennsylvania kept a head of green cabbage in the cellar from October through March, wrapped in a damp newspaper to hold the moisture. On a tired Thursday, they sliced half a head thin, dropped it into a wide pan with a generous spoonful of bacon grease saved from breakfast, and let it cook down slow until the edges browned. A pound of wide egg noodles got boiled right next to it in the same pan with a little of the cabbage water for body. Tossed together, salted hard, finished with a crank of black pepper from the wooden mill. That was supper for under 60 cents in 1962, and the smell of it carried 2 doors down the block. Number 18. Spaghetti with tomato soup. Before jarred sauce arrived in every grocery aisle, the cheapest hot pasta supper in an American kitchen was made with a red and white can of Campbell's. Boil the spaghetti in a wide pan. Drain. Pour the can of tomato soup right over the noodles. Add the empty soup can full of water, stir in a spoonful of butter, and a hard shake of dried oregano from the tin on the door. Heat through. Italian-American grandmothers in New Jersey would never admit to making it, but their daughters who married out into the suburbs cooked it on Wednesdays when the real sauce was reserved for Sunday. 1 can, 1 pan, 1 starch. The supper hit the table in 15 minutes flat. Children asked for it on their birthdays. Number 17. Tater tot hot dish. Ori Ida invented the tater tot in 1953 in Oregon, and within 10 years, the freezer aisle at every grocery store from Duluth to Fargo carried a bag of them in a red box. Lutheran grandmothers in Minnesota and the Dakotas built a 1-pan supper around it almost overnight, and the recipe ran in church basement cookbooks from Mankato to Bismarck. Brown a pound of ground beef with a chopped yellow onion in an oven-safe pan. Stir in a can of cream of mushroom soup and a can of cut green beans straight from the cellar shelf. Cover the top with frozen tater tots arranged in tight rows like roof shingles. Slide the pan into a moderate oven for 35 minutes. 1 dish to bring to a church basement supper on Wednesday night. 1 dish to wash before the late news came on. Number 16. Fried bologna hash. The thick-cut deli bologna from the meat counter cost half what ground beef cost in 1961, and grandmothers in West Virginia and eastern Kentucky knew that down to the penny. Dice a half pound of bologna into rough half-inch cubes on the cutting board next to the sink. Brown it hard in her iron pan until the edges curled and crisped and the kitchen smelled like a diner counter. Add a chopped yellow onion, a diced cold-boiled potato left over from last night, and a hit of black pepper from the tin. Press the whole hash flat with the back of the spoon. Let it crust on the bottom for 4 minutes without moving it. Flip the whole slab once, crack 2 eggs right on top, lid on, 3 more minutes. Supper for 4 out of last night's leftovers and a tube of cheap lunch meat from the corner store. Number 15. Skillet goulash with macaroni. The newspaper printed a recipe called American Goulash back in 1909, where cubed beef got baked with rice, tomato, and onion. By the time the Depression was grinding into its 3rd winter, the recipe had drifted onto a stovetop, and the rice had turned into elbow macaroni. Grandmothers in Ohio mill towns and Indiana farm kitchens cooked it in a deep skillet on the back burner with 1 pound of ground beef, 1 chopped onion, 1 can of tomatoes, 1 can of tomato sauce, and a cup of dry elbows poured right into the same pan with 2 cups of water. Lid on. 22 minutes on a low flame. The starch from the macaroni thickened the sauce without a roux, and the whole supper hit the table in the time it took to set out plates. Some families called it goulash. Some called it just hamburger and noodles. Either way, it was the kind of pot a tired woman could leave alone while she folded a basket of warm laundry on the kitchen chair. Number 14. Liver and onion skillet. Beef liver was the cheapest cut at the A&P meat counter in 1953, less than half what a chuck roast brought the same week. German and Polish grandmothers in Milwaukee and Buffalo bought a pound of it on Thursdays and cooked it on Thursday nights when there was nothing else cheap left in the icebox. Dredge thin-sliced liver in flour seasoned with salt and pepper from the wooden mill on the counter. Slick a big iron pan with a spoonful of bacon grease saved in a tin can on the back of the stove. Lay 2 sliced yellow onions in first and let them go soft and brown for 10 slow minutes. Push the onions to one side. Lay the floured liver in the open hot half of the pan. 3 minutes aside, no more, or it turned to shoe leather. Heap the onions back over the top. 1 supper, 1 pan, 1 dish to wash. Number 13. Spanish rice with hamburger. This was the pot that needed nothing more than 1 onion, a half cup of rice, and whatever meat was wrapped in paper at the bottom of the icebox. Brown a half pound of ground beef in her deep skillet. Drop in the chopped onion. Add a half cup of dry, long-grain rice straight from the cardboard box. Pour in a can of stewed tomatoes and a cup of water. A shake of paprika from the red tin. Lid on, 25 minutes on the lowest flame. The rice drank the tomato juice, the meat scraps stretched themselves across a family of 5, and the supper cost about 40 cents in 1958 money. Texas grandmothers cooked it on weeknights and called it Spanish rice without ever crossing the border. Number 12. Bubble and squeak. British war brides who married American GIs and shipped over to Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Boston between 1944 and 1947 brought this skillet trick with them. Yesterday's boiled potatoes and yesterday's boiled cabbage went into a hot pan with a generous spoonful of bacon drippings. Press the whole thing flat with the back of a spoon. Let it sit untouched on a medium flame for 6 minutes so a brown crust formed on the bottom. The name came from the sound the cabbage made hissing against the hot iron, which the English had been calling bubble and squeak since at least 1762. Flip the slab once, crust the other side, slide it onto a plate and crack a fried egg on top. Supper out of 2 leftovers and a pat of grease. Number 11. Frito Pie Skillet. The Frito-Lay publicity team served Frito's chili pie to the Dallas Dietetic Association in 1949, and the recipe ran on millions of red and yellow bags in 1962. Heat a can of chili, pour it over a pile of corn chips, top with grated cheese and chopped onion. By the late 60s, working mothers in Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma were making the skillet version on weeknights when nothing else was thawed. Brown a half pound of ground beef in her seasoned pan. Stir in a can of pinto beans and a small can of tomato sauce with a shake of chili powder. Pile a bag of Fritos right on top of the simmering chili. Cover with a fistful of shredded cheddar. Lid on for 2 minutes to melt the cheese. Spoon it straight from the pan onto 5 plates. Number 10. Polish sausage and cabbage skillet. Milltown grandmothers in Hamtramck, South Chicago, and Cleveland kept a ring of kielbasa from the corner butcher in the icebox most weeks of the year. On a Wednesday when the meat money was almost spent, they sliced the whole ring into thick coins and laid them in a hot iron pan to brown in their own fat. Half a head of green cabbage shredded thin went in next, a halved yellow onion sliced thick, a few cracks of black pepper. The cabbage cooked down in the sausage fat for 15 minutes with a lid on, and the supper smelled like a Polish church basement in November. A boiled potato split open on the side of the plate caught the pan drippings. The whole pot fed 6 people for under $1.25 in 1964. Number 9. Skillet tamale pie. California ranch wives and Texas farm mothers in the 1930s built this one out of a Mexican idea and an iron pan. Brown a pound of ground beef with a chopped onion in a deep skillet. Stir in a can of stewed tomatoes, a can of whole kernel corn, a fistful of olives if you had a jar in the cellar, and a teaspoon of chili powder. Whisk up a quick cornmeal batter in a separate bowl with 1 egg and a cup of milk. Pour the batter right on top of the simmering meat. Lid on, 20 minutes on a low flame. The cornmeal puffed and set into a soft yellow crown. The recipe ran in Sunset magazine in 1942 and showed up in every junior league cookbook from San Diego to Tulsa by 1955. 1 pan to wash, 1 supper for a long table. Number 8. Skillet Spam Hash. Hormel started canning Spam in 1937 in Austin, Minnesota, and by 1944 the company was shipping 15 million cans a week to American troops in the Pacific. When the boys came home, they wanted the taste of the chow line on a Saturday night, and their mothers and young wives obliged. Dice a half can of Spam into rough cubes on the wooden board, brown them hard in her iron pan until the edges caramelized and the kitchen smelled like the inside of a mess tent. Add a chopped cold boiled potato. Add a yellow onion diced fine. Press the hash flat. Let it crust on the bottom for 4 minutes without touching it. Flip the slab once. Crust the other side. Crack 2 eggs right onto the top. Lid on, 3 minutes. Hawaiian grandmothers cooked the same hash on Sundays after church and called it home. Number 7. Mock oyster stew. Coastal New England grandmothers in the 1920s and 30s had the real version with fresh shellfish, but inland farm wives in Kansas and Nebraska had never seen an oyster in their lives. They used canned salsify, sometimes called oyster plant, which tasted faintly briny when boiled. Slice the salsify into coins. Drop them into a wide pan with 2 cups of whole milk, a knob of butter, a few grains of salt, and a few grindings of pepper. Heat slow until the milk barely steamed. 12 minutes total. A handful of crushed oyster crackers floated on top of each bowl. The whole supper came together for next to nothing in 1936 and tasted enough like the ocean to satisfy a homesick prairie woman. Number 6. Skillet hamburger pie. This was the pot that stretched a single pound of ground beef across 5 plates and a packed lunch. Brown the meat in a deep iron pan with 1 chopped onion. Drain off the grease into the tin can on the stove. Stir in a can of cut green beans straight from the cellar and a can of cream of mushroom soup. Spread the meat flat in the pan. Heap a bowl of mashed potatoes over the top, edge to edge. Slide the whole pan into the oven for 20 minutes until the potato peaks browned. Cut into wedges like a real pie. 1 slice for each child, 1 for the husband, 1 wrapped in waxed paper for the lunch pail next morning. Number 5. Corned beef hash. The dish came out of New England Irish kitchens in the 19th century as a way to use up the boiled corned beef and cabbage from a Sunday dinner. By the 1860s, a cheap restaurant in America was called a hash house, and the cooks behind the counter were hash slingers. Wartime rationing in the early 1940s pushed canned corned beef into every grocery shelf, and grandmothers in Boston, Providence, and Hartford turned it into a one-pan Tuesday supper. Dice the meat, dice a cold boiled potato, dice an onion. Brown the whole pile hard in her iron pan until a dark crust formed on the bottom. Crack 2 eggs right onto the top and lid the pan for 3 minutes. The yolks broke when you cut into the hash, and that was the sauce. Number 4. Skillet pork chops and apples. The pairing was already cemented in American kitchens by the mid-1800s, with a recipe for pork chops and applesauce running in Good Housekeeping in 1893 and another in Fannie Farmer's Boston Cooking School Cookbook in 1896. German immigrant farm wives in Pennsylvania, Missouri, and the Ozarks made it in one pan because the orchard ripened the week the hogs were slaughtered. Brown 4 thin pork chops in her iron pan with a spoonful of lard. Lift the chops out. Slice 2 tart apples into thick rings. Drop them into the pork fat and let them caramelize for 4 minutes. Lay the chops back over the apples. Lid on. Lowest flame, 12 minutes. The apples broke down into a sauce. The chops finished tender. Number 3. Ham and beans. A pound of dry navy beans cost about 14 cents at the IGA in 1955, and a leftover ham bone with shreds of meat clinging to it was free if you had served the ham on Sunday. Country grandmothers in Kentucky, Tennessee, and southern Illinois built a one-pot Monday supper out of those 2 things. Soak the beans overnight in a crock on the back of the counter, drain them in the morning, drop them into a deep iron pot with the ham bone, a halved yellow onion, a clove of garlic, 2 bay leaves, and enough water to cover by 3 fingers. Slow simmer on the back burner all afternoon while the wringer washer ran in the basement and the sheets hung on the line. 4 hours later, the broth had gone milky and rich, the beans had gone soft, and the meat had fallen off the bone in long shreds. A pan of cornbread baked in the oven during the last 20 minutes. Supper for 7, almost free. Number 2. Skillet mac and cheese. Long before the blue Kraft box arrived in every grocery in 1937, American grandmothers were making mac and cheese on the stovetop in a single pan. Boil a half pound of dry elbow macaroni right in 2 cups of whole milk with a knob of butter and a hard shake of salt. Stir often. When the noodles softened 15 minutes in, the milk had thickened into a starchy sauce. Off the heat. Stir in 2 big handfuls of grated sharp cheddar from the brick wrapped in waxed paper in the icebox. The cheese melted in the residual heat. A crack of black pepper. That was supper for 4 children and a tired mother in one pan in 1953 with no oven heat in a hot July kitchen. Number 1. Skillet sausage gravy and biscuits. This was the supper a Southern grandmother made on the worst nights, when she had been on her feet since 5 in the morning and could not face one more minute of fuss at a stove. Brown a half pound of breakfast sausage in her iron pan. Sprinkle a heaping tablespoon of flour over the meat. Stir it into the grease until the flour turned the color of sand. Pour in 2 cups of whole milk. Whisk slow until the gravy thickened around the bits of sausage. Salt and a hard crank of black pepper. Drop spoonfuls of buttermilk biscuit dough right onto the simmering gravy. Lid the pan and walk away for 12 minutes. The biscuits steamed open and turned fluffy on top. 1 pan, 1 spoon. She sat down with a plate of it in her own chair at the head of the table, and for the first time since the rooster crowed, nobody was asking her for anything. Corned beef hash from a can became an unlikely hero for seniors who needed hot, filling meals without the fuss of extensive preparation. The rectangular cans lined grocery store shelves at budget-friendly prices, containing a mixture of corned beef and potatoes that transformed when properly cooked. The secret was patience, spreading the hash in a hot, greased skillet and leaving it alone until a dark, crispy crust formed on the bottom. That crust was the prize, shattering against the teeth before giving way to the soft, savory interior. A fried egg placed on top turned it into a complete meal, the runny yolk creating an instant sauce that coated every bite. Seniors living alone appreciated that a single can provided 2 generous servings, each one satisfying enough to carry them through to the next meal. The dish required only a skillet and a few minutes of attention, making it perfect for those days when cooking felt like too much effort. Corned beef hash proved that convenience and comfort could coexist beautifully. Chicken fried rice with canned chicken delivered a satisfying stir-fry that used pantry staples to create takeout flavor in record time. Day-old rice separated beautifully in a hot skillet coated with a thin film of oil, each grain absorbing the smoky heat. Diced onions, carrots, and peas added color and sweetness, sizzling as they released their fragrance. A can of cooked chicken provided tender meat with no extra prep, breaking apart into savory shreds that mingled with the vegetables. A quick splash of soy sauce and a sprinkle of garlic powder tied everything together, while scrambled eggs folded in at the end brought richness and body. The result was a meal that tasted carefully crafted yet came together in less than 15 minutes, perfect for evenings when energy ran low but appetites ran high. Families loved how it stretched a small amount of protein across several generous portions while clearing the fridge of leftover rice. Each spoonful offered the comfort of home and the excitement of a restaurant favorite, a reminder that great flavor does not require a long list of fresh ingredients when skill and heat meet simple planning. Mashed banana and mayo sandwiches might sound strange to modern ears, but back in the day, this sweet and tangy sandwich was a Southern staple that showed up in plenty of lunchboxes. You mashed up a ripe banana, spread it on soft sandwich bread, and added a swipe of mayonnaise. That was it. It was quick, cheap, and surprisingly filling. Families leaned on recipes like this when groceries were scarce and meals had to stretch. The banana added sweetness, the mayo gave it creaminess, and together they turned plain bread into a fast, satisfying lunch. You would find this sandwich scribbled in old community cookbooks, passed down at church picnics, or tucked into handwritten recipe boxes that lived in kitchen drawers. It might be forgotten now, But for plenty of folks growing up during hard times, this odd little sandwich was a reliable 10-minute fix when money was tight and hunger was knocking. Canned ravioli was the Italian dinner that came in a can and never asked for praise. You popped open the metal lid, poured the heavy red sauce into a pot or a bowl, and microwaved it until it bubbled around the edges. The smell was artificial, the sauce too sweet, and the ravioli too soft, but none of that mattered, because it was food. And sometimes that was the only requirement. Chef Boyardee was not a chef in your kitchen, he was a lifeline, a shortcut to something that felt like a meal even if it came from a shelf instead of a stove. You ate it straight from the bowl, sometimes with a slice of bread to soak up the sauce. Other times, just a fork and a quick prayer that no one noticed how many nights in a row you were eating the same thing. The meat inside the pasta was more memory than substance, a whisper of protein in a sea of tomato. But it was hot, and it was filling, and it kept the stomach quiet when the cupboards were mostly bare. You were not proud of it, but you were grateful, because for $1 or less, it gave you something to hold on to. Cheddar grits casserole brought Southern comfort to weeknight tables while cleverly using scraps to stretch a grocery dollar. Cooked grits were stirred with sharp cheddar cheese, a splash of milk, and any small bits of leftover ham before being baked until the top formed a golden crust. The creamy base and salty accents provided warmth and satisfaction, making it a favorite for cool evenings or family gatherings. Because grits were inexpensive and widely available, this casserole offered a filling main dish that fed many mouths without straining a budget. Home cooks often prepared it in the morning and reheated it for supper, appreciating how well it held its texture. Children loved the mild cheese flavor, while adults enjoyed the hearty, stick-to-your-ribs appeal. Paired with a green salad or simple stewed tomatoes, the dish delivered balanced comfort with little expense or effort. Its staying power in community cookbooks and church potluck menus shows how thrifty Southern traditions easily blended with mid-century convenience to create a meal everyone could enjoy. Fried cabbage and sausage was a one-pan wonder that stretched a single link of smoked sausage into a meal that fed body and soul alike. Cabbage cost almost nothing and kept for weeks in the refrigerator, making it a staple for seniors watching their budgets. The sausage was sliced into coins and browned until the fat rendered out. Then shredded cabbage was added and cooked until wilted and slightly caramelized. The cabbage absorbed the smoky, porky flavor from the drippings, transforming from a humble vegetable into something deeply satisfying. A splash of vinegar or a sprinkle of caraway seeds added complexity without adding cost. The dish came together in under 20 minutes and required nothing more than a cutting board and a skillet. One small head of cabbage and one sausage link created enough food for 3 meals, making it extraordinarily economical. The sweetness of the cooked cabbage balanced the salty richness of the sausage perfectly, proving that poverty cooking could produce genuinely delicious results. Fried potatoes and onion skillet was a fast, hearty stovetop meal that showed up in countless kitchens when times were tough and bellies needed filling without much fuss or money. You would slice up potatoes, chop some onions, heat a little oil or butter in the skillet, and fry everything until golden and crispy. That was it. It sounds simple now, but back when groceries were scarce and time was short, this was a meal that worked. The potatoes filled everyone up, the onions added flavor, and the skillet turned humble pantry staples into something hot, hearty, and satisfying. Some folks added eggs, bacon, or herbs if they had them, but most kept it practical and affordable. You would find this recipe scribbled on old note cards, tucked into grandma's cookbooks, or passed down by word of mouth through generations of families who knew how to stretch every last ingredient. Fried potatoes and onions might seem forgotten today, but back then, it was a reliable fix for hungry families trying to make groceries last, keep dinner on the table, and survive the lean weeks when every meal counted just a little more. Of cuts without the price, an idea perfectly suited to the frugal 1960s kitchen. Ground pork was blended with breadcrumbs, minced onion, and a touch of milk before being seasoned with a bit of sage and pepper to mimic the gentle taste of veal. The mixture was shaped into a loaf and baked until the top formed a golden crust and the inside stayed moist and tender. A light tomato glaze or brown gravy completed the illusion, giving families a hearty centerpiece that felt far fancier than its ingredients suggested. This recipe became a favorite in community cookbooks and church fundraisers because it fed a crowd with ingredients already on hand. Leftovers made excellent sandwiches the next day, stretching the value even further. By transforming simple pork and pantry staples into something that seemed luxurious, mock veal loaf embodied the clever resourcefulness that defined many mid-century American dinners, proving that satisfying flavor did not require an expensive shopping list or complicated preparation. Bean and bacon simmer was the kind of slow-cooked meal that filled small homes with warmth and the promise of something good waiting on the stove. Dried beans cost pennies per pound and provided protein that rivaled meat at a fraction of the price. Seniors would sort through the beans each morning, cover them with water, and let them soak while going about their day. By evening, the beans were ready to simmer with a few strips of bacon, diced onion, and enough water to cover everything by an inch. Hours of gentle cooking transformed the hard beans into creamy, tender morsels while the bacon infused the liquid with smoky richness. A single pound of dried beans created enough food to last nearly a week when portioned carefully. The cooking liquid itself became a treasure, thick with flavor and nutrients that could be sipped like broth or used to moisten cornbread. This wasn't a meal that happened quickly, but for seniors with time and little money, bean and bacon simmer provided security in every spoonful. Cold spaghetti with Italian dressing was one of those forgotten leftover tricks that stretched a single meal into something new without much time or money spent. You would take last night's spaghetti, rinse it off if needed, toss it in a splash of bottled Italian dressing, and that was dinner or lunch, ready in under 10 minutes. It sounds plain, but back then, this was an easy, thrifty way to keep food from going to waste and keep everyone fed. Families leaned on recipes like this when grocery lists ran short and leftovers became the next meal. The dressing added tang, the pasta filled you up, and it all came together cold, quick, and satisfying. You would find cold spaghetti with Italian dressing scribbled in community cookbooks, passed along at potlucks, or quietly traded between neighbors looking for affordable meal ideas. Some folks tossed in vegetables or cheese if they had any left, but most kept it simple and practical. It might feel forgotten now, but back then this cold pasta salad was a staple for families trying to stretch their meals, save their money, and still have something satisfying on the table without turning on the stove. Canned Vienna sausages were the snack that somehow became dinner more often than anyone wanted to admit. You pulled back the metal lid, revealing 6 or 7 tiny pink sausages floating in mystery liquid. They smelled like salt and metal and something vaguely meaty. You ate them cold, straight from the can, or warmed them in a pot if you had time. Sometimes you served them with crackers, sometimes just with your fingers. No one dreamed of Vienna sausages, but we learned to respect them. They were there when fresh food was not. They tasted like hard times, but also like resilience. They were soft, almost mushy, but full of protein and easy to store. In homes where refrigeration was unreliable and money was always short, these cans were gold. Not because they tasted good, but because they lasted. They were cheap, reliable, always there when you needed something, anything to put on a plate. You never bragged about eating Vienna sausages, but you remembered them, because they saw you through more hard days than you can count. Pea and egg salad plate was a thrifty supper that turned humble staples into a refreshing main dish for a warm evening. Canned peas were drained and chilled before being folded with chopped hard-boiled eggs, diced celery, and a splash of mild vinegar dressing. A pinch of dry mustard or a spoon of mayonnaise added just enough richness to bind everything together while still keeping the cost low. Served on crisp lettuce leaves or alongside sliced tomatoes from the backyard garden, it provided protein and texture without any need for meat. Home cooks loved how quickly it came together using pantry items that were inexpensive and easy to find year-round. Children enjoyed the gentle sweetness of the peas, while adults appreciated the subtle tang from the dressing. This simple combination was light enough for summertime, but filling enough to carry a family through a busy evening, reflecting the practical yet creative spirit of mid-century kitchens, where canned vegetables and eggs formed the backbone of many dependable weeknight meals. Ham and scalloped potatoes baked together in a single dish created the kind of meal that felt fancy despite its humble ingredients. Leftover ham, often purchased as a marked-down end piece from the deli counter, was cubed and layered with thinly sliced potatoes in a deep skillet or baking dish. A simple white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk was poured over everything before the dish went into the oven to bake until the potatoes were tender and the top turned golden brown. The ham released its salty, smoky flavor into the creamy sauce while the potatoes absorbed everything, becoming impossibly rich and satisfying. A small ham piece and a few potatoes fed one senior for 3 or 4 meals, making it economical despite its indulgent taste. The dish required time in the oven but minimal hands-on effort, perfect for those who needed to rest while dinner cooked itself. Ham and scalloped potatoes represented the best of vintage cooking. Simple ingredients elevated through technique into something that felt like celebration. Vegetable curry stew introduced a mild touch of international flavor to American kitchens while staying firmly in the realm of affordable comfort food. Potatoes, carrots, onions, and canned chickpeas simmered slowly with a gentle dusting of curry powder, filling the house with a warm, spiced aroma that felt both new and familiar. The recipe was flexible enough to accept any vegetables on hand, making it ideal for gardeners or thrifty shoppers. During the 1960s, when interest in global flavors was growing, this stew offered a budget-friendly way to explore something different without leaving the home kitchen. Served with plain rice or a slice of crusty bread, it delivered a complete protein and plenty of satisfying texture. Families discovered that the spices brightened otherwise simple ingredients, proving that excitement at the dinner table did not require expensive meats or specialty imports. Vegetable curry stew stands as a delicious example of how mid-century cooks embraced fresh ideas while still practicing the frugality and adaptability that defined their daily meals. Salmon Patty Skillet was a thrifty creation that turned an inexpensive can of pink salmon into golden, crispy cakes that satisfied like nothing else. Seniors on fixed incomes knew that canned salmon provided protein, calcium from the soft bones, and nutrients that doctors would later praise as essential. The salmon was drained, flaked, and mixed with crushed crackers, a beaten egg, and minced onion before being shaped into patties and fried until the exterior turned deeply golden. The inside stayed moist and tender, with a flavor both familiar and comforting. These patties were often served right in the skillet alongside fried potatoes or with a simple white sauce poured over top. A single can yielded 3 or 4 patties, enough for 2 dinners with careful portioning. The recipe required no special ingredients and came together in minutes, making it ideal for evenings when energy was low. Salmon patties represented the ingenuity of making something genuinely delicious from pantry staples. Pork chop sandwiches gave thin-cut chops a starring role in a dinner that felt hearty yet required little effort. Lightly seasoned pork chops hit a hot skillet and browned in minutes, their edges turning crisp while the meat stayed juicy inside. Soft sandwich buns toasted nearby, ready to cradle the sizzling chops as soon as they were done. Some families added pickles or a smear of mustard for tang, while others kept it simple, letting the rich flavor of the pork shine on its own. The entire meal came together before the evening news finished its first story, a perfect option for nights when work ran late. Each bite balanced the tender meat with the soft bread, creating a combination that was both rustic and satisfying. Affordable and fast, these sandwiches showed that even a modest cut of meat could deliver the comfort of a full supper without hours in the kitchen, keeping hunger at bay and spirits high. Grape jelly meatball skillet might sound like a strange mix now, but back then, it was one of those quirky, sweet, and savory meals that showed up fast and stretched what little meat you had. You browned some mini meatballs in a skillet, poured in grape jelly and a splash of mustard, and let it all bubble together. In 10 minutes flat, dinner was ready. It was sweet, tangy, salty, and surprisingly filling. Families leaned on recipes like this because they turned a small amount of ground beef into a meal that felt bigger than it was. You could find this in old church cookbooks, clipped from women's magazines, or scribbled onto recipe cards tucked in drawers. It was not about fancy ingredients. It was about getting something warm, satisfying, and a little fun onto the table, fast. Today it feels forgotten, but back then, this sweet skillet meal kept homes running during the toughest weeks. Goulash was not Hungarian, not the kind we grew up with. This was American goulash, elbow macaroni, ground beef, and a tomato sauce that always tasted a little like metal. It was a one-pot meal, no rules, just a way to take cheap ingredients and turn them into something that could feed a small army. Some families used onions, others added garlic if they had it. But at its core, it was just meat, pasta, and sauce. And it was enough. You could scoop it out in huge portions and still have leftovers. It reheated well. It was easy to make. And most importantly, it was cheap. Goulash was the dinner you made when you could not afford variety. It was everything in one dish. And it worked. You knew it was going to be a goulash night when the cupboards were getting low and the mood in the house was just a little more tired, but somehow that big pot of steaming pasta made things feel okay. For one night at least. Celery and cheese soufflé brought elegance to an inexpensive vegetable that most people considered only a snack or soup ingredient. Finely chopped celery was sautéed with a bit of butter and folded into a fluffy base of beaten eggs and grated cheese before being baked until the top rose and browned. Despite its sophisticated appearance, the ingredients were simple and affordable, making it a popular choice for dinner parties on a budget. The soufflé delivered a gentle crunch from the celery against the airy texture of the eggs, surprising guests who expected something plain. Because the recipe relied on pantry staples like milk, eggs, and a small amount of cheese, it fit perfectly into the frugal cooking philosophy of the time. Home cooks loved that it felt fancy without requiring costly ingredients or specialized equipment. Served with a crisp salad or a slice of toasted bread, this dish turned an ordinary evening into a special occasion and demonstrated how a humble vegetable could take center stage in a memorable meal. Tomato gravy over rice was Southern poverty food that generations of seniors relied upon when the pantry was nearly bare, but dinners still needed to happen. The gravy started with bacon drippings heated in a skillet, then flour was stirred in to create a roux that cooked until golden. Canned tomatoes were added along with water to create a gravy that was tangy, rich, and deeply comforting. Sugar balanced the acidity while salt and pepper brought everything into focus. Poured over a mound of white rice, this simple combination became a meal that satisfied hunger without straining the budget. A single can of tomatoes and a cup of rice fed one person for 2 days, making it one of the most economical dinners possible. The dish carried memories of harder times, of grandmothers who knew how to make something from nothing. For seniors eating alone, tomato gravy over rice was both nostalgia and nourishment in a single skillet, proof that comfort could be measured in the simplest ingredients prepared with care. Breakfast for dinner. Pancake stack with bacon turned a morning favorite into a fun and filling evening meal. Flour, milk, eggs, and a little baking powder whisked together quickly to form a smooth batter that poured onto a sizzling griddle, sending up a sweet, buttery aroma. Each pancake bubbled and browned in just minutes, ready to stack high while crisp bacon strips cooked in a nearby skillet. The smoky scent of bacon mingled with the warm fragrance of fresh pancakes, creating a kitchen atmosphere both cozy and exciting. Butter melted between layers, while a slow drizzle of warm maple syrup cascaded over the stack, soaking each fluffy round. The salty bacon provided the perfect counterpoint to the soft, sweet pancakes, making every bite a blend of textures and tastes. Families loved the playful switch of serving breakfast at the end of the day, and cleanup was minimal, leaving more time to relax. In less than 20 minutes, this meal offered pure comfort and a gentle reminder that the best dinners are sometimes the ones that break the rules in the most delicious way possible. Jelly roll-ups on white bread were a quick, sweet little snack that kept plenty of kids going when there was not much else to pack in their lunchbox. You took a slice of sandwich bread, rolled it flat with a rolling pin or a glass, spread on jelly, and rolled it up tight. That was all there was to it. It sounds simple now, but back then, this was the kind of treat that showed up when families had to stretch every dollar. It was fast, easy, and made use of pantry staples that were always on hand. You would find these roll-ups tucked into school lunches, brought to church picnics, or passed around as after-school snacks when groceries were running low. The jelly added sweetness, the bread kept it filling, and it all came together in just a few minutes. It might be forgotten today, but for plenty of families, these jelly roll-ups were a quick fix that kept kids happy and parents sane. Cornbread and milk was a Southern lullaby disguised as dinner. You took day-old cornbread, dry, crumbly, almost stale, and dropped it into a glass of cold milk. No sugar, no spice, just spoon and memory. It was humble food, the kind you did not question because your grandparents ate it too. Some people used buttermilk, others regular. It depended on what was left in the fridge and how soft you needed the bread to be. You ate it with a spoon, slowly, like it was soup. It filled you without asking for attention. It was cheap, simple, and oddly soothing. There was something honest about it, like admitting you had little but making peace with it anyway. In some homes, this was a treat. In others, a last resort. Either way, it kept bellies full and silence at the table. That matters more than most people know. Chicken fricassee was old-fashioned comfort that transformed tough, inexpensive chicken parts into tender, gravy-smothered perfection. Before boneless breasts dominated supermarket cases, seniors bought leg quarters for pennies and knew how to coax flavor from every piece. The chicken was dredged in seasoned flour and browned slowly in a deep skillet, building a fond on the bottom that would become rich gravy. Onions and celery joined the pan before liquid was added, and the whole pot simmered until the meat fell from the bones. The gravy thickened naturally from the flour coating, creating a velvety sauce that begged to be soaked up with bread or rice. One chicken leg quarter could feed a senior for 2 meals, when stretched with plenty of gravy over something starchy. The dish was forgiving, patient, and deeply satisfying. The kind of cooking that required time but rewarded it generously with flavor and nourishment that modern convenience foods simply cannot match. Cheddar and broccoli omelet made a hearty egg dinner with bright color and bold flavor in minutes. Eggs were whisked with a splash of milk and a pinch of black pepper, then poured into a hot skillet where butter foamed at the edges. Fresh or frozen broccoli florets steamed quickly in the microwave or in a small pan, keeping their green snap and gentle sweetness. As the eggs began to set, sharp cheddar cheese was scattered across the surface, releasing a nutty scent as it melted. The broccoli folded inside added texture and an earthy contrast to the creamy eggs. In less than 10 minutes, the omelet slid onto a plate, golden on the outside and gooey within. Served with toasted bread or a handful of greens, it offered both comfort and nourishment, proving that dinner can be simple yet feel complete. This dish turned basic staples into a meal that pleased everyone at the table while leaving only one pan to wash, making it ideal for nights when time and patience were in short supply, but good food was still essential. Cold canned salmon salad was one of those quick, thrifty meals that turned an inexpensive pantry staple into a fast, protein-packed plate when groceries were running low. You flaked canned salmon into a bowl, stirred in mayonnaise, and chopped celery if you had it, and served it up cold. That was all there was to it. Fast, simple, and surprisingly satisfying when families needed something filling in a hurry. It might not sound exciting now, but back then, this recipe showed up in lunchboxes, on picnic tables, or tucked onto a dinner plate when meat was scarce and time was tight. The salmon added protein, the mayo brought it all together, and the celery gave it crunch if you were lucky enough to have some in the fridge. Families leaned on meals like this to stretch their groceries and keep everyone full without much effort. You would find cold canned salmon salad scribbled onto old recipe cards, passed down by neighbors, or quietly tucked into grandma's collection of forgotten quick meals. It might be overlooked now, but back then this was a reliable 10-minute fix when money was tight. Pork chop rice skillet was the kind of meal that simmered away while seniors rested in their chairs, filling small apartments with the aroma of home cooking. A single bone-in pork chop, often purchased on sale for mere cents per pound, was browned in a well-seasoned skillet until golden. Rice was added directly to the pan along with water or broth, and the whole thing was covered and left to cook slowly until the rice absorbed every drop of porky flavor. The meat became fork tender, practically falling off the bone, while the rice turned creamy and rich from the rendered fat. Some added a can of cream of mushroom soup to make it even more substantial, while others kept it simple with just salt, pepper, and a bay leaf. The dish required almost no attention once assembled, making it perfect for those with limited energy or mobility. One pork chop and a cup of rice fed a senior for an entire day, proving that economy and satisfaction could share the same plate. Vegetable fried rice with leftover meat transformed scraps and day-old rice into a fragrant dinner in less than 15 minutes. Cold cooked rice was the key, each grain separating as it hit the hot oil of a wide skillet or wok. Bits of carrot, peas, and diced onions followed, their colors brightening as they sizzled. Leftover meat, whether pork chops, chicken, or beef, was sliced thin and tossed in with a splash of soy sauce and a drizzle of sesame oil. A quick scramble of eggs in the corner of the pan finished the dish, binding everything together with soft ribbons. The result was smoky and savory, carrying the scent of garlic and ginger through the house. Families appreciated how it cleared the refrigerator of odds and ends while creating a meal that tasted planned and special. Served hot straight from the pan, it proved that yesterday's rice and scraps of meat could become a satisfying dinner that rivaled takeout, saving both time and money without sacrificing flavor or comfort. Pimento cheese on saltines was a southern staple that turned a few pantry ingredients into a quick, satisfying snack when groceries were running thin. You mixed up pimento cheese, usually some shredded cheddar, mayonnaise, chopped pimentos, and spread it over saltine crackers. That was it. 10 minutes or less, and you had something creamy, salty, and packed with flavor to hold you over until dinner. It might sound simple now, but back then, this little recipe kept homes running when budgets were stretched and time was short. The saltines gave it crunch, the pimento cheese added richness, and together they made a snack that showed up at school lunches, church picnics, or as a quick fix on busy afternoons. You would find this recipe scribbled onto old note cards, tucked in faded cookbooks, or passed down through generations of families who knew how to make the most of what they had. It might be forgotten today, but for plenty of folks back then, pimento cheese on saltines was a fast, filling favorite that saved the day more than once. Chili and crackers were the meal you made when you needed fire in your belly and not much else. Ground beef, a can of beans, tomato sauce, and every spice you could find in the back of the cabinet. You let it simmer until it thickened, bubbling and bold, the kind of dish that fogged up the windows and warmed up the room. You served it with saltine crackers, always saltines, stacked on the side or crumbled right in. Sometimes there was shredded cheese, sometimes a dollop of sour cream. But usually, it was just the basics, and that was fine, because chili did not need help. It had enough heat, enough bite, enough heart. You ate it with a spoon too big for the bowl and left the table feeling like you had won something. Maybe you had. Cabbage and sausage fry-up offered big flavor and a full stomach with almost no preparation. Pre-cooked sausage slices hit the skillet first, releasing fat and spice that would season everything to come. Thin shreds of green cabbage followed, sizzling as they met the hot pan and softening into tender ribbons that soaked up the sausage drippings. A splash of vinegar or a pinch of red pepper flakes brightened the dish, while a quick toss brought everything together in less than 10 minutes. The combination of smoky meat and sweet cabbage made each bite taste richer than its humble ingredients suggested. Served alone or with a slice of bread, it filled plates and satisfied appetites without straining the grocery budget. Working families valued the ease, but they also loved the hearty, old-world flavor that reminded them of meals once cooked slowly, now captured in minutes. Egg in a whole toast was one of those fast, comforting breakfasts that managed to make plain old bread and eggs feel like something special in under 10 minutes. You would grab a slice of sandwich bread, cut a circle right out of the center, toss it into a hot skillet with a little butter, and crack an egg into the hole. That was all it took. The bread toasted up golden, the egg cooked right inside, and suddenly breakfast was on the table without much work or money spent. Families leaned on meals like this when mornings were hectic, paychecks were stretched thin, and everyone still needed a hot meal before heading out the door. It was a staple for school days, early church mornings, or whenever groceries were low but hunger was high. Some folks added cheese or herbs if they had them, but most kept it simple and practical. You would find egg in a hole scribbled on recipe cards tucked into faded cookbooks or passed down by word of mouth through generations. It might feel forgotten today, but back then, this quick breakfast trick kept countless families full, happy, and ready to face the day with just bread, eggs, and a hot skillet. Pancakes for dinner was the rebellion no one talked about, but everyone loved. You mixed flour, milk, and eggs in a bowl, poured it onto a hot griddle, and watched the bubbles rise like tiny promises. Stack after stack, golden and imperfect, sometimes burnt at the edges. It felt like cheating, but no one called it out. In a house full of stress and unpaid bills, it was the rare moment that felt light. Pancakes reminded us we could bend the rules without breaking ourselves. You poured syrup until it pooled at the base, or you used jam, honey, or even just sugar and butter. Whatever you had, dinner did not have to be savory. It did not have to follow the rules. Pancakes were a reminder that even when money was tight, you could still enjoy something. You could still treat yourself. Kids loved it. Adults sighed with relief. No meat, no sides, just breakfast masquerading as dinner. And maybe that is what made it so special. It felt like breaking the rules in the best possible way. Country ham and red-eye gravy brought a bold, salty kick to the end of a long day, drawing on traditions that went back generations. Thin slices of country ham hit a hot skillet and sizzled until their edges crisped and their smoky scent filled the kitchen. Once the meat was removed, strong black coffee was poured into the pan to deglaze the savory bits, blending with a splash of water and a touch of butter to create the dark, rich gravy that gave the dish its name. The result was a sauce both bitter and savory, perfect for spooning over the ham or soaking into warm biscuits. In less than 15 minutes, the table held a meal that tasted slow, cooked, and soulful. Working families appreciated the speed while still honoring a Southern classic, and the sharp aroma of coffee and ham became a sign that dinner was ready. Each bite balanced salt, smoke, and a subtle bitterness, a reminder of farmhouse suppers where nothing was wasted and flavor came from skill and tradition rather than expensive ingredients. Hot milk cake. Slices with butter were a quick, sweet fix that turned leftover dessert into a satisfying breakfast or afternoon snack with hardly any effort. You sliced up leftover hot milk cake, toasted it gently or warmed it up, and slathered it with butter. That was it. 10 minutes or less, and you had a rich, soft, slightly sweet bite that kept everyone happy when groceries were tight and meals had to stretch. It sounds simple, but back then, this little treat was a kitchen staple, especially in homes that believed nothing should go to waste. The hot milk cake gave it sweetness, the butter added richness, and together they turned leftovers into something new and satisfying. You would find this recipe scribbled in old cookbooks, passed down through generations, or quietly shared between neighbors looking for ways to make every crumb count. It might be forgotten today, but for plenty of families back then, hot milk cake slices with butter were a warm, comforting reminder that even the smallest leftovers could be turned into something worth savoring. Spam and eggs were the emergency dinner that never felt like one. Spam was the meat that came in a tiny rectangular can, and once you heard that suction sound as it slid out, you knew what was coming. You sliced it thick or thin, fried it in a pan until it crisped at the edges, and served it alongside scrambled eggs that may or may not have come from a powder. It was salty, greasy, and surprisingly good, if you grew up eating it, that is. Some people looked down on Spam, but when money was tight, Spam was a lifesaver. It had a long shelf life, required no refrigeration, and could be stretched across several meals. It showed up in casseroles, sandwiches, and stews, but next to eggs, it felt like breakfast for dinner, which somehow made everything okay. You would douse it in ketchup or hot sauce, whatever you had, and you would eat it at a small table with mismatched chairs and flickering lights and think, this could be worse, and it often was. Minute steak with onion gravy delivered the taste of a slow Sunday supper in a fraction of the time. Ultra-thin beef steaks hit a hot skillet and browned within moments, releasing a rich aroma as they seared. After the meat was set aside, sliced onions cooked in the drippings until they softened and turned sweet. Then a splash of beef broth and a dusting of flour transformed the pan juices into a smooth, savory gravy. The steaks returned to the pan for a brief simmer, soaking up the onion-infused sauce. Served with buttered toast or a mound of mashed potatoes, the dish tasted like comfort that had taken all afternoon, even though it was ready in less than 20 minutes. Families appreciated its hearty flavor and quick cleanup, while the fragrant gravy made the kitchen smell welcoming and warm. Each forkful combined tender beef and silky onions, a reminder that a satisfying meal does not require hours of preparation when technique and simple ingredients come together perfectly. Italian sausage hoagies brought the flavor of a street fair to the dinner table with little more than a skillet and a few minutes. Pre-cooked Italian sausage links browned quickly until their casings crackled and juices sizzled across the pan. Sliced onions and bell peppers joined the heat, softening and caramelizing as they soaked up the seasoned drippings. Hoagie rolls warmed in the oven until lightly crisp on the outside and tender within. When the vegetables turned golden, the sausages nestled into the rolls, draped with the sweet pepper and onion mixture, and a light scatter of shredded provolone if desired. Each bite balanced smoky spice, soft bread, and the gentle sweetness of slow-cooked vegetables. The meal felt festive, yet required almost no effort, making it a favorite for families who wanted bold taste without a long cooking session. Served with a simple green salad or a handful of chips, these hoagies brought the spirit of an Italian street vendor into a busy kitchen, showing that fast food can still be deeply satisfying and full of character when prepared with care and served piping hot. Peanut butter and sweet pickle sandwiches were one of those strange combinations that somehow became a regular part of vintage kitchen routines. You spread creamy peanut butter on soft sandwich bread, added sliced sweet pickles, and pressed it together. That was it. Quick, crunchy, and a little tangy with just enough sweetness to balance it out. It sounds odd now, but back then it was a favorite for busy lunches, quick after-school snacks, or when there was not much else in the pantry. The peanut butter gave it richness, the pickles added bite, and together they made a sandwich that stuck to your ribs and kept you going. You would find this one scribbled in old recipe boxes passed around at church picnics or quietly tucked into Grandma's cookbook among the other quirky 10-minute meals. Families leaned on this recipe because it came together fast, filled you up, and used ingredients most people always had on hand. It might be forgotten now, but for plenty of households back then, peanut butter and sweet pickle sandwiches were a surprising lifesaver when time and money were both running short. Grilled cheese and tomato soup was the closest thing to comfort food that poverty could buy. 2 slices of bread, a single slice of cheese. Into the pan it went, sizzling in butter or margarine until golden brown. You flipped it once, maybe twice, careful not to burn it. The cheese melted just enough to glue it all together. You knew this was poor man's food, but it never tasted that way. It tasted like someone tried. It tasted like effort, not leftovers. Then came the tomato soup, hot, red, and straight from the can. You poured it into a chipped bowl and dipped the sandwich in until it softened at the edges. That was the bite. The one that made it feel like someone cared. This was a sick day meal, a snow day meal, a we still have cheese meal, and it felt like a hug every time. Even now, the smell alone can take you back. Sardine and onion sandwiches were one of those quick, no-frills meals that filled hungry workers up fast and showed up in plenty of lunch pails across America. You opened a tin of sardines, laid them on rye bread, added some raw onion slices, and that was it. Simple, salty, and ready in under 10 minutes. It might sound harsh now, but back when protein was hard to come by and groceries were scarce, this was a go-to meal. The sardines gave you the protein, the onions added bite, and the rye bread kept you full. You would find this sandwich scribbled into old cookbooks, passed around among factory workers, or tucked into lunch boxes for folks heading out the door. It was never fancy, but it worked. Today, most people have forgotten how handy meals like this were, But back then, sardine and onion sandwiches helped plenty of families stretch what little they had and stay full through long, hard days. Steak tips with garlic butter turned small pieces of beef into a dinner that tasted far more luxurious than the clock allowed. Bite-sized cubes of steak were seasoned with salt and pepper, then seared quickly in a smoking hot skillet until browned on the outside and just tender within. As the meat rested for a moment, butter melted in the pan with minced garlic and a handful of fresh parsley, creating a sauce that smelled like a steakhouse. The sizzling butter was poured back over the meat, coating every piece in rich, garlicky flavor. Served over toast, rice, or even plain with a side of vegetables, the dish offered restaurant-style indulgence in the time it took to set the table. Families loved how a modest amount of beef could feel like a feast, and the sound of butter hitting the hot pan became a signal that the day's work was over and something delicious was ready. That iron pan is still in a daughter's cabinet tonight, sitting on a stack of newer pans that never earned the same trust. Pull it out this week. Skillet sausage gravy on Monday, mac and cheese on Tuesday, hamburger pie on Wednesday when payday is 2 days away. Cook from memory, not from a phone. The women who fed our families this way had less than we do, and they cooked anyway.